All right, guys, what's going on? DStyleBoxing here. Thanks to those joining me live and to those that will be joining me on archive. Don't forget to hit the like button if you like it. And if you don't, then hit the dislike button. It's all good. It's all good. All right. Um, let's go ahead and talk about, because, everybody's talking about Conor McGregor going to the boxing ring to face Floyd Money Mayweather. This will be a Marcus of Queensberry rules fight, sanctioned boxing fight. If Mayweather wins, it will be his 50th pro victory in the boxing ring. But let's talk about the flip side. Let's talk about the times boxers went to mixed martial arts. In fairness, I had a private message in the red. Hey, you're talking that shit about Mike Perry getting knocked out, but why don't you ever mention the boxers that went to MMA and got schooled? Talk about that. Well, I have talked about that, but let's go ahead and dive into it, right? Because it's fair. It's only fair, okay? Even though the dude came aggressive, you guys, you don't got to come aggressive. You can just have you could ask a question. You could say, hey, why don't you talk about the other flip side? That's fine. You don't have to come all aggressive and shit. Relax, chill, right? So let's talk about it. Let's dive in, right? Let's go to the highest, board and dive right in. Okay, let's dive right in. So first of all, I'm only going to talk about what comes to mind. So this is all freestyle, right? I don't have shit in front of me. So I'm not even going to remember some names, but the first quote unquote, like there's two cases anyway of boxers that participated in MMA. So let's dive in here. Let's dive in. And let me get the names in fairness. So let's see. All right. So first there was UFC 1, okay, where Royce Gracie was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and part of the Gracie clan, the Gracie family. This was, way before mixed martial arts evolved into what it is today, right? Way before that. And this was when headbutts were allowed, groin shots were allowed. I mean, there was absolutely, they had no boxing gloves on. Gracie was allowed to wear his fucking gi. Like, it's just way different, right? Way different. Crazy. That's crazy, to be honest with you. Like, you know what I mean? That's some crazy shit, but it was some brutal shit back then. And it's good that they don't fight like that today, because those guys would probably kill each other if they didn't have the rules that they have, and they didn't have they didn't have to wear gloves, and it wouldn't be pretty. Like there would be a lot of horrible injuries, plus groin shots. I mean, I understand you could shoot to the groin in a street fight, but nobody really wants to see that in a sport. Some stuff was illegal, like fish hooking was illegal, eye gouging was illegal. These are things that happen in street fights and under survival that people don't take into account. Biting was illegal, right? Which I'm fine with. Nobody wants to see that shit. But nonetheless, Art Jimmerson, okay, who was a pretty solid boxer, to be honest. He was a contender, I believe a top 15, top 10 contender. And he wore one glove. I mean, you can't make this shit up. I mean, when MMA started, these dudes were experimenting. In fairness, they're experimenting with shit. And this guy thought, well, I'm going to wear one glove. I mean, I don't know. And they let him. Like, they let him wear the glove. That's insane. Which makes me think, like, if he was able to wear boxing gloves, they did have, like, the what are they called? They look like MMA gloves, but, the ones that you wear to hit the speed bag. I forget the name. I'm surprised nobody, like, thought about wearing those to protect your hands if this guy's allowed to wear a boxing glove. But, yeah, this dude wore it looked like a 10-ounce boxing glove to the ring, like, against Royce Gracie. He got taken down, obviously. It took Royce a little bit to take him down. But once he took him down, it was over at that point. That was a time in the UFC where, like, when a grappler took down a guy that knew nothing about grappling, there was a 99% chance that fight was over. All right. And especially with him having he didn't need the gi in this one, but especially like with the gi and stuff, and these Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys, they use the gi. You know what I mean? So that was crazy, by the way. Hoist, by the way, I believe didn't he use, I could be mistaken about this. I believe he used the gi in his Ken Shamrock fight, the first one, and it was in the same UFC. It was a fight right after this. Interesting note here. I'm kind of surprised that they had Shamrock fight Gracie in the second round. That was kind of weird how they did that. But it's also interesting that Ken Shamrock got Patrick Smith, who didn't really know much about ground fighting, but he was a real good kickboxer, or decent one. Pretty solid. So he had a much better shot anyway of beating Ken Shamrock, because Ken wasn't really that great at the stand-up, So I don't know if there was a calculated risk there or what. I know they were hoping even if he loses, he could pop Shamrock, but nonetheless, Art Jimmerson did not fare very well here. He even had shoes on. Like, it's back in the day, like, these dudes would like come in the way they fought in their sport, or in their martial art. Like a dude walked in with a fucking, like, the kung fu. I remember there was like a karate fighter versus a kung fu fighter. I think this was like UFC 2, right? It was a pretty good fight, actually. It was kind of interesting. But it was just, they were literally making no adjustments to the reality around them. Like, they were just fighting the way that they fought in what they did. It was kind of odd. The only guy that had a grasp of the hybrid fighting was Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie to a certain degree, right? But Royce was very heavy Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Royce never became a great striker or anything like that. But he was. That was a time where a lot of these dudes didn't know grappling that well, and so he would take them down and dominate them. Big dudes even. He had trouble with some big dudes like Chemo, but But anyway, I don't want to make this about Royce Gracie in the early UFC days. So Art Jimmerson, right? He got taken down. That's submitted by Royce, and I think it took Royce maybe 2 minutes at most to put this guy away, and that he did, man. He put him away. All right. Royce was a little cautious at first, but he used the kicks to set up the takedown, and it was a wrap. All right. And then I'm trying to think here. I know Renzo Gracie. Let's see here. And look it up. Be chill, relax. He fought a boxer, James Warren, I believe was his name. Was it James Warren? Now this boxer did outweigh him by 40 pounds. Okay, and let me double check. Yeah, James Warren. Yeah, he was 18-4 as a pro boxer. But what's interesting here, James Warren, he did pretty good. He did pretty good. He won like some other fights and stuff before he got to Renzo Gracie. He was a tough dude. Let me get to James Warren real quick. Let me look up his MMA record. He had 2 wins by TKO and 1 loss. The loss was against Renzo Gracie, right? He did win 2 fights before he got to Renzo Gracie, right? This was a time in MMA where they had no weight classes. It was perfectly normal to fight somebody that outweighed you by 40 pounds, which again is insane. But Renzo Gracie, obviously, he had the strategy down. They knew how to fight, a pure boxer, right? And and that's, you know, he dominated them. He was at the time, the Gracies and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, before people started hybriding, you know, started using hybrid methods, they were the ones dominating, right? You know, they're the ones that were, you know, showing everybody up. They had the Gracie Challenge out there and stuff like that. But like anything, right? Once people started picking up their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, once they started picking up, you know, all that stuff, you know, once it became a hybrid, once everybody knew about it, right? You know, once the techniques were taught to and were open to everybody, the shit got interesting after that, okay? And anyway, so those are two boxers that I could think of. James Warren being one. He was a journeyman boxer that, you know, he won 2 fights. I never saw those 2 fights, but they did have some hybrid rules in fairness. So it wasn't like the way MMA is today, right? But he definitely got eaten alive by Renzo Gracie. Now, let's go ahead and fast forward a little bit here, okay? Now, there has been some guys that did Golden Gloves and stuff like that, or they had an amateur background in boxing, and those guys, right? They don't count, right? Like they just don't count. You know, it's I don't care if they want some Golden Gloves, you know, when they were 14 years old, or it's just that doesn't count. Like you have to have a pretty reasonable boxing career, right? That's who we're counting here. We're not counting dudes with that. Even if they started in boxing, right? We're just going to go with guys that were professional boxers and then they tried out MMA. That's what we're talking about here. But let's move on, okay? So you got those two guys. This was in the early stage, back when everybody was getting eaten alive, you know, by the Gracies, okay? Let's go ahead and talk about years later. So this guy is never talked about, right? You know what? We're going to leave him for last because he's the most successful story that boxing has, okay? But let's move on. So Ricardo Mayorga comes to mind, right? We're going to get to the obvious one in a moment, but Ricardo Mayorga, now this was in the down low. This was in Nicaragua. This was when Mayorga was obviously, you know, past his prime, okay, and out of shape. And he was fighting guys that fight at welterweight in mixed martial arts, which in mixed martial arts, there's a difference there. Mayorga was fighting at 147, 154 in boxing, and he's fighting MMA guys that weigh 170. So these were, you know, naturally bigger guys, and you're going to their sport. They weren't world beaters, okay? They weren't the best, you know, that MMA has to offer. You know, these are guys that haven't even made it to the UFC, right? Which is their big league over there. But nonetheless, Ricardo Mayorga was going to have a fight with Dean Thomas, right? He was going to do the fight with Dean Thomas. Now, in that fight, Ricardo Mayorga was basically arguing because he wanted out of the Don King contract. He did not want to fight for Don King anymore. And the only way he could box, he needed Don King because of the contract he signed with Don King, right? But Ricardo Mayorga got the whole promotion went through. They had press conferences. They had a hype video on YouTube and back in the day, and he was going to fight Dean Thomas, right? Now, make no mistake about it. There was about a 99% chance that Dean Thomas, outside of getting caught with a big shot, was going to beat Ricardo Mayorga and probably beat him under 2 minutes, okay? I'm pretty confident of that. Maybe 3 minutes, maybe. But nonetheless, you got to give Mayorga credit. I mean, he was going to do it, right? Now, the hilarious part is that Ricardo Mayorga, let me tell you something, Ricardo, okay? They were interviewing this guy, and I quote, well, first they asked him, how are you preparing for this fight? And I quote, well, I'm doing my boxing like usual, and I have some very secret training that I'm doing, and once I win this fight, I will reveal the guys that are, providing me with a secret training, you know. And he also said, he was at America's Top Team, where he was mainly working on his boxing there, and I don't know exactly what he was doing, but he said I quote, I picked up some tricks, right? I picked up some stuff from some of my friends there, like really. I wonder this guy that watches, like he watched him rolling, was like, I could do that. And he thought he learned it just by looking at it or some shit. I have no idea, right? And Ricardo also said, and I quote, because they asked him, how do you think you're prepared? Like, how are you really prepared for boxing? Look, I'm a street fighter, okay? I mean, it's street, you could soccer kick, you can hit, use your head to strike, you could, he just went all out. Like, he's talking about how I'm a street fighter. I can fight in the streets. And I fought in the streets my whole life and this, that, and the third, right? So there you go. But anyway, I remember the press conference. Ricardo Mayorga was talking all types of shit, okay? Ricardo Mayorga is one of his top 3 GOAT, okay, when it comes to trash talk, right? And with a translator, it sounds awesome. It really does. But in this particular, he had a woman do the translation for him, like this older woman, I believe anyway. And it just added to it, man. It was beautiful. And Mayorga didn't say something about Dean Thomas's mom, but he mentioned his mom. And he said that your mom's not going to recognize your face. And I guess Dean Thomas got pissed, right? And Dean Thomas was trying to trash talk, but it didn't work out. He wasn't that good of a trash talk, right? But Mayorga, let me tell you something, man. Dean Thomas like sized the dude up. Mayorga didn't hesitate. Mayorga threw. It wasn't even a punch because he was in the podium facing the people, and Dean Thomas came from I believe it was his left side. Mayorga just did like this karate chop like weird slap. It was like pop, like just popped him, and Dean Thomas, he didn't know where he was for a good 2-3 seconds. Okay, he was like, whoa, but everybody ran in, they broke it up, right? And Dean Thomas is still trying to find his footing. He did not see that coming. Okay, he did not see that coming whatsoever. But then fight night, Don King showed up like a pimp, taking his whole man. He showed up. Don King, even at that age, just showed up and just shut that shit down. And he took Mayorga and eventually got Mayorga the Cotto fight. Right, so Mayorga made more money in that fight. So it actually, in the end, worked out for him. Okay, because he was better off in that fight than what was going to happen in the Dean Thomas fight. I can tell you that much right now. Right, but with that said, later on, Mayorga, once he couldn't find any more paydays in boxing. Right, once he couldn't find any more days and. He was out of shape. He was clearly no longer the same fighter. He was never the fastest fighter in the world, but you could just see the diminished skills. You could see the diminished speed. He was just an old shot fighter now. And he tried mixed martial arts. In his first mixed martial arts fight, he predictably got taken down. But I don't know, like it was like weird. Like it was like bizarre. Like the other guy looked like he was in control, and then Mayorga like threw a knee and kneed the dude in the spine, which is illegal. You can't do that, right? So in fairness, the fighter's not expecting that, So he leaves that exposed because you're not supposed to hit him there. So he kneed him in the spine, and the guy just goes and then he couldn't continue, and I guess Mayorga was awarded the decision. But then the commission overturned it and they called it a no contest because that's an illegal move. But the dude kneed the guy in the spine. That's insane. The other outings of Mayorga weren't as successful. He got submitted by a dude in about 1 minute and 30 seconds, something like that. I mean, the guy, he wasn't going to stand up and fight Mayorga like that. I mean, basically every MMA fight Mayorga had, they closed distance, they got him in the clinch, and they took him down. And that's basically what they did. They gave him no leverage with those shots, Like Like they were real careful coming in, boom, clinch, take him down. That's basically what most of the dudes did. So his first fight, it lasted like a minute and 27 seconds, something like that. I think it was a guillotine choke. In his third fight, Mayorga actually went the distance. He actually went 3 rounds against a journeyman MMA fighter. I mean, this guy's a nobody, right? If Mayorga was younger, he would have won. I'll tell you that much right now. It was a close decision. The fight's hilarious to watch. I don't even know why, but it's just hilarious to watch. It was just basically, it just looked like a street fight. That's what it looked like. All right. And, but he went the distance. He lost a split decision in Nicaragua. All right. I believe it was in Nicaragua anyway. And then they had a rematch, and that fight was highly entertaining too, and hilarious as hell as well. But the guy caught Mayorga in an armbar in the middle of the second round. Okay, he caught him in an armbar, and either you tap out or you break your arm, right? So Mayorga tapped out, and that was that, man. Then Mayorga announced that he was going to return to boxing, and I have no idea where that went. Okay, because he has no business in either sport now. All right, but that is Mayorga's story, right? I think it would have been interesting to maybe find a guy that would be willing to thump with Mayorga, right? But that would be stupid, In fairness, you could tell from the first fight to the third one that Mayorga did work a little bit on his MMA. Like he was doing a pretty decent job at blocking the knees of the guy in that second rematch. The guy that beat him by split decision the first time. He did a decent job, Now, again, this is not a guy that was a world-class wrestler or anything like that, but he was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy. He had a lot more experience grappling than Mayorga, and Mayorga did a pretty decent job, of not getting taken down. He did it, and I honestly believe that if Ricardo Mayorga grew up and instead of taking on boxing, took on MMA as a teenager and learned, mixed martial arts and learned his grappling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And we obviously know he had power in his hands. So I think he would have been a bona fide MMA fighter. I really do. And there you go. So that's Ricardo Mayorga's run in mixed martial arts. And got to give Ricardo credit, man. I mean, that guy went into foreign territory, and even in the midst of getting taken down and all that, he was never scared. He was never scared of these guys. And then there's James Toney, right? James Toney, I honestly believe that James Toney thought he could win because James Toney had a certain outlook on MMA, right? Like he viewed it a certain way. I think he saw these guys' hands and he thought, well, I'm not that impressed. If I clip one of these dudes, they're done, right? And to a certain degree, he's right in the sense that if they boxed him, he would beat them pretty handily, But I mean, they're going to do more than that, right? They're going to do way more than that. James Toney, I mean, he talked his way into this fight. Now, I don't even think James Toney got paid that much, to be honest. I think he made, like $500,000 or $600,000, something like that. But I think that was a little more than what he was making boxing at the time. James Toney was obviously a very diminished fighter at the time. But even that diminished, make no mistake about it, if it was a boxing match, he would have knocked Couture out, But it was not a boxing match. And by the way, I think Couture admitted that actually. But it was not a boxing match. But James Toney, I believe, like he honestly thought he was going to win that fight. Like I think in his heart, he thought he was going to win, And I'm not even going to lie, like deep down, I was like, oh, I hope he wins. Like I knew what was going to happen. But I still thought, like, deep down, I hope this guy wins, right? And it's funny because James Toney, like, hired this, like, martial arts guy, right? That was supposedly just like Ricardo Mayorga, right? He had a private instructor. And supposedly he had an MMA team. You know, I don't know what he learned. Like, I think James Toney knew, like, look, I'm not going to learn the level of grappling that I need to learn, right? In one camp. I mean, first of all, he showed up in horrible shape, but I think James Toney knew my only shot is at the beginning. Like, my only shot is either A, Couture tries to box me to prove something, maybe, or you know, I catch him coming in, you know. And one thing, interesting interview I saw is that, like, first of all, Boss Rutan actually gave Toney some good advice, and he told James Toney, look, when guys coming for the double leg, you know, you have a really good uppercut. You could hit him with that uppercut, and now you gotta take them out, like, because if you hit them with the uppercut, but they get the double leg, I mean, you know, they'll recover while they're down there. You know, even a day's experienced wrestler will handle you down there. You know what I mean? But and try to tell him the importance of, you know, takedown defense, but James Toney never listened to all that. Like, as soon as that bell rang and I saw James Toney in his typical boxing stance, I knew it was over. I was, oh, this dude's done. His leg was so exposed, and Randy Couture admitted this. I heard an interview of his where he said, for the first time in a very long time, he worked on his single leg takedown. They don't really do. They still do them, but to shoot and go for a single leg, they rarely do that nowadays, right? You really see guys do double leg takedowns. And he explained in the interview, you know, we don't really do single legs anymore because, well, you know, guys today are really good at, you know, takedown defense, and it's more difficult to take down someone who knows what they're doing with a single leg. That you'll pay the price, you know, whether they grab you from the back of the neck and knee your ass or whatever it is. But what James Toney felt, I could do the double leg, but James Toney has no experience with somebody taking him down like that, so he did the single leg in that fight. Took James Toney down, controlled him in the ground. It was very obvious that James Toney had no clue what he was doing. All right. And Couture had 100% control down there. And I'll never forget something Tito Ortiz said. And he said, look, I've been doing MMA my whole life. And when I was under Couture, I couldn't move for shit. Right? I don't know who remember that Couture was spanking Tito Ortiz. Well, you know, remember when he spanked him? I said, well, what is James Toney going to do if Couture gets on top of him? You know, and James Toney couldn't do anything. And James Toney got. Okay, James Toney is also lucky that was Randy Couture, right? To quote, what's his name? Josh Barnett. Couture, you know, he's not a vicious fighter. Like, you know, he went for the submission, but I'll give James Toney this though. He tried to slick his way out. You know, like he tried to find a slick way out where they could stand up again. You know, he also took some hellacious shots, and to his credit, he never stopped. Right, he never stopped until they put him in. He didn't know what he was doing, but he was still trying. And Couture, of course, put him in a submission hold, and then that was it. You know, but James Toney, he wanted to let Couture know he was done, but not the ref, so Couture could let him go. And then he started punching Couture, and then Couture got him again. I mean, holy shit. And then the ref, if you guys hear, the ref was like, how about you just tell me? How about you just say he was trying some slick shit. Didn't work, obviously, but hey, points returned. So that's James Toney's story. And that's a wrap. You know, and so he's way too old to learn MMA and all that. He's too old for that. You know, he went back to boxing, and James Toney actually beat the hell out of some some bare knuckle champion dude in a boxing fight, knocked that guy out. And then I don't even know what James Toney did from there. I'm still surprised they never set up James Toney versus Kimbo Slice, in a boxing ring. James Toney was way past it. They had Kimbo Boxing. They could have set that up. Like, could you imagine the trash talking that shit? But they never did it. I think they were going to do, at one point, James Toney versus Ken Shamrock. I remember that. And the trash talk was insane. That fight never materialized. But I'll tell you what, though. I don't know who would have won that fight. Because Ken Shamrock, I mean, you just blow on him nowadays, he gets knocked out. Like, it's like, I don't know. Like, maybe I would give Toney a pretty decent shot of landing some. I really would. I know it sounds crazy, but Ken Shamrock was shot by then, right? But anyway, that never materialized. So that's James Toney's run. Not good. Not good at all. Right? Not good whatsoever. Now let's talk about Ray Mercer, right? Merciless Ray Mercer. Now, Ray Mercer, another guy. I mean, he at a very old age, a lot of boxing commissions wouldn't even give this guy a boxing license. Okay, clearly punch drunk by then, but he he tried MMA. Let me look up his MMA record because I believe he only had 2 fights, but let me double check really quick. MMA professional record: Ray Mercer, 1 win, 0 losses. That doesn't even make sense. Because I know he lost to Kimbo, so I don't know where they're getting 0 losses from. Was the Kimbo fight not sanctioned or what? That's weird. I don't know. Sure Dog doesn't have it on here, but I know he lost. But anyway, Merciless Ray Mercer. First, it was a Kimbo Slice fight, right? Which, in all honesty, like, all bullshit aside, that should have been a boxing fight, right? Now, Ray Mercer would have won the boxing fight, right? But if that, I mean, this is what I never got. I never got why Kimbo went to MMA. That never made sense to me, all right? Like, he was the so-called king of underground bare-knuckle fist fighting, right? That's what Kimbo was known for. That's what made him a big star, like on YouTube and shit. Dude was thumping. You know what I mean? He was talking about his haymakers, his right hand and his left hand, knocking dudes out, right? That's the, and if instead of wasting all that time in mixed martial arts, if they would have put him in boxing with the right, like boxing there's so many levels to boxing that you can, with the right matchmaking, give a guy a 10-0 record. You could make that happen. You could have done something with Kimbo, right? And you had a storyline there. In MMA, they exposed him to get taken down and beaten that way, and it was predictable what was going to happen, especially for people that saw Kimbo. Like, it was weird because this shit ain't sanctioned, but a guy that he was supposed to have a fist fight with started trying to take him down, throwing knees and elbows and shit. And Kimbo still fought the guy, but I don't even know. I don't know what was agreed on, or that's just not even official. Like, you know what I mean? But they should have known that wasn't Kimbo's thing. Kimbo should have been a boxer. Okay. This was at a time where MMA was at a rise, and and all that. But this Gary Shaw is a fucking moron. Okay. Gary Shaw wanted to get out of Dodge. Okay, in boxing, and he wanted to kind of start his own like UFC company, which is Elite XC. And they had that big contract with Showtime, and they utilized Kimbo. Kimbo got a lot of ratings, man. He would have got those ratings if it was a boxing fight as well. Okay, they could have done something with that. I'm telling you, they fucked up. But rest in peace to Kimbo. I would like Kimbo, I really did. But anyway, with that said, Ray Mercer, you know, when he went in there, Ray Mercer expected, Kimbo to, throw fists. That's what he thought was going to happen. Instead, Kimbo pushed him back against the ropes, threw some shots, and then took him down. And they got like a guillotine, which anyone could get out of with the proper training. But, I mean, Ray Mercer had no idea what was going on the ground. He had no idea. He even got on top of Kimbo, but Kimbo had this guillotine on him, and he tapped out, right? And then kind of, when Kimbo let go, he kind of did a gesture that he was going to punch him while he was in the ground. But he didn't, and he got up, and Kimbo was really mad about that. But anyway, that was his first outing, okay, for Ray Mercer. And I'll say this, and you won't even believe this, okay? Because this was Kimbo's first MMA fight, and I still don't understand why it's not on Sherdog. But they don't do Kimbo like that, right? But anyway, you wouldn't believe this, man. I remember I was on the Sherdog forums, and I still remember, okay, MMA fans saying that Ray Mercer's going to win that fight. Ray Mercer has had professional boxing fights. Kimbo's fighting bums in the street, right? They were siding with the boxer in that fight, right? They were siding with the boxer in that fight. But nonetheless, a lot of Kimbo fans let him have it after that. I mean, this shit was crazy, right? Ray Mercer's second outing, was supposed to be a boxing fight originally, because Tim Silva was talking about wanting to be the first ever, dude to be a world champion in mixed martial arts, and he was a former UFC heavyweight champion and a world champion in boxing, right? And Tim Silva was talking big game here. I mean, this dude was saying that I don't care what anybody says, I believe in myself, and blah, 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 right? It's only hands. I don't have to. Does it sound familiar, right? So that was going to be his debut boxing fight against an old-aged Ray Mercer, right? But the promotion fucked up, and because there was something that wasn't working now with the sanctioning. Okay, I don't know what happened exactly, but they wanted to have them box inside like a cage, an MMA cage, right? Which is stupid. Like, the ground's not even made for that. So they said, well, we're going to have to make it an MMA fight. And credit to Ray Mercer, man. He didn't back down. He said, okay, let's do it. He probably needed the money, to be honest, right? But Ray Mercer said, let's do it. But he kept telling Tim Silva, fucked with his head, man. Like, hey, you're the one that wanted the boxing fight, and now we're making an MMA fight. Like, you know what I mean? I prepared for a boxing fight. I've been training for a boxing fight. You're talking about how you're going to take over boxing. Like, he got in Tim Silva's head, right? And so when they went in there, Tim Silva threw one kick, and Ray Mercer gave him a look like, come on, man. And Tim Silva decided, okay, I'm going to try this, right? I'm going to give it a shot here. And that brief moment that he decided that he was in a box, Ray Mercer capitalized. Ray Mercer landed a big right hand, and Tim Silva got knocked out, okay? Tim Silva, knocked out cold. And he was down for a while, too. And credit to Ray Mercer, man, landing that punch. And he slipped down, slippery foot, he's barefoot and stuff. And he got up and he gave the most epic speech imaginable, man. Talking about, Ray Mercer was like, it was him against the world, man. I felt happy for him, too. He was like, he said, 2 weeks notice. MMA fight, 2 weeks notice, he said. They only had a 2 weeks notice. They had him preparing for a boxing fight, and they gave him a 2 weeks notice that it was MMA, right? And then he kept saying, "I'm the MMA champ." He said, "I'm the MMA champ." Like it's insane, right? And thank God he didn't decide to pursue MMA any longer, right? Thank fucking God, right? I know he when Kimbo was trying boxing, he wanted that rematch in the boxing ring, but Gary Shaw wouldn't give it to him, and we all know why, right? But shout out to Ray Mercer, man. He had his Ray Mercer has something that I don't think we'll ever see another boxer have. You know, like Ray Mercer has a victory in an MMA fight against a guy who was a UFC champion. You know, like that. That's no one else can say that. You know, even though Tim Silva got knocked out because Tim Silva thought that he could box this guy. That's why he got knocked out, right? But nonetheless, he still got knocked out, right? Now, anyway, so that's Ray Mercer's story. Moving on. Thankfully, he did not decide to prove that he's the MMA champ, and I think he's retired now. Hopefully, he's not fighting in anything now, right? Well, that's it. A guy that no one really talks about, which is astonishing to me. It's very astonishing. And I'm surprised that Dana White and company never took advantage of this personally, right? Because Jeremy Williams, right? Jeremy, half man, half amazing. Okay, Williams. He is by far, okay, the biggest success story of any boxer going to mixed martial arts. By far, okay? Jeremy Williams, I'm going to pull it up here really quick. There's two Jeremy Williams, by the way. So whenever you pull up, there's a guy just called Jeremy Williams, and there's Jeremy half man, half amazing Williams. So when you look up his MMA record, that's who you're looking for, all right? Jeremy Williams went 5-0 in mixed martial arts. He won 3 fights by TKO, 2 by submission. He had no losses, okay? He did not pursue the career any longer. More than likely because he was too old already, right? He had these fights in a span from 2005 to 2008, right? At this point, the guy's too old, right? His first fight he won in first round by knockout, okay? And then he won his second fight by submission. He was punching the guy quit, okay? The first fight in the first round, the second fight in the second round. He won by guillotine choke in his third fight. That was in the first round. And he won his fourth fight. The other guy got exhausted, okay? And he TKO'd him in the third round. And then, of course, TKO with punches in the last fight in the first round. Now, here's the thing about Jeremy Williams. Now, obviously, Jeremy Williams, okay, was a solid contender in the heavyweight division in boxing. He fought at light heavyweight in MMA, right? And most people know him by the brutal knockout that he suffered at the hands of Sam Peter. Okay, look that up, right? But nonetheless, Jeremy Williams went to mixed martial arts, went 5-0. And this is a guy who was a legitimate top contender in the sport of boxing, and he went and had some success in mixed martial arts. You'll never hear this, right? Now, the astonishing part is that I'm surprised that, look, he fought from 2005 to 2008. I am very surprised that the UFC never enticed him to sign for him. I'm very surprised. Because they could have, why didn't they try to use him for boxing versus MMA? Well, why the hell did they try to use James Toney? You know what I mean? Now, there's a reason Jeremy Williams had success, right? He obviously, I mean, look, he landed some hooks on these dudes that, sparked them. Yes. But the boxing alone is not what did it, right? He was also a judoka, right? He was a very experienced judo practitioner. There's actually a story of Jeremy Williams, and there's footage of it. You could look up this footage, actually. Jeremy Williams was a sparring partner for Lennox Lewis, right? And they had something escalated in the sparring session. Jeremy Williams picked up Lennox Lewis and slammed him to the mat, right? Lennox Lewis got back up, man, but Lennox Lewis is not a small dude, right? Lennox Lewis is not a small guy. He picked him up and slammed him down, right? Like when it came to like this, okay, this ain't boxing no more. Like boom, you know what I mean? So there you go, Jeremy Williams, right? By far the most successful, boxer that went to MMA by far, right? And even then, I'm not saying he, what's funny is that I say Ray Mercer has something that no one else has. Like he knocked out a former UFC champion. And look, a lot of MMA fans, especially after that, act like Tim Silva wasn't shit. Tim Silva was a UFC heavyweight champion of the world like 2 or 3 times. He beat Andrei Arlovski, who was a top contender for a long time. Okay? Like, it's not like he was shit. But yeah, he lost and he got his ass handed to him by Randy Couture. Yes, Randy Couture handed his ass to him, right? He got his ass handed by Fedor. Yes. Okay, but nonetheless, at one point he was a UFC heavyweight champion of the world. Okay, I'm just saying. But even with that win, I mean, it's obvious that Jeremy Williams is a better mixed martial artist, if you want to call it that, than Ray Mercer. Okay, it's not even funny, right? And now there's in the flip side, you got your MMA guys that fought some journeyman boxers and won, like Victor Belfort, and there's some other guys that have some 1 or 2 wins. There's some guys that their only professional boxing fight they lost, right? I think Nick Diaz, if I'm not mistaken, I think Nick Diaz has a boxing fight or 2. I think, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? Do we count KJ Noons as a boxer that went to MMA? I don't know. I think KJ Noons is more like a kickboxer that then tried boxing and MMA. I think that would be more appropriate, right? I can't really count KJ. KJ Noons never did anything significant in boxing. He never made the top 20, top 25, So I'm not going to count KJ Noons. But there you go. All right, there you go. If you could think of any more, let me know. All right. I know Anderson Silva had 1 or 2 boxing fights, I think. No one of significance, but he did. And I'll tell you what, that even though that journeyman boxer got his ass handed to him by Anderson Silva, the fight I saw, he did catch Silva a couple times. And this was a real sharp Silva, where nobody could literally touch him in that octagon. That's all I could think of, really. A lot of MMA fighters have had amateur boxing fights and stuff like that, but nothing that really stands out. McGregor is definitely by far the practitioner. For him to come from mixed martial arts, at best he has an amateur boxing background, but Conor McGregor is doing amateur boxing from like age 12 to like age 16 or some shit like that. Like, it's not exactly fighting men in the boxing ring, But it's going to be really interesting how that plays out, right? And one of the main reasons I wanted to do this is because everybody thinks that the only time a boxer went to MMA was when James Toney did it. There's other stories, some ugly, okay, some embarrassing, but some successful, right? Some very successful, you can't deny that. So now here comes an MMA guy, trying to show boxing up, and we'll see how it goes. You know what I mean? Well, which brings me to this, right? Which brings me to this. I know there's a lot of people that are saying that Floyd's scared that Conor is going to do some MMA stuff in the boxing ring, and that Floyd is scared of Conor in the press conferences and stuff like that. Well, there's no doubt. First of all, I don't think it's just because Conor's a MMA fighter. For some reason, Floyd, when he knows there's a chance that the guy will do something, he acts kind of weird, right? So, like, the Margarito confrontation comes to mind, right? Some people feel like Margarito got the best of him, when he approached him and told him, hey, when are you going to fight me? That fight never happened, by the way, but still, right? And that's probably Shane Mosley's fault, but hey. Now, here's the thing, right? I hope everybody understands. Even, like, I just went through a rundown of a bunch of washed up boxers going to mixed martial arts. Many of them which got their asses handed to them, right? But when you look at it, it took the guy a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 rounds, whatever it was, right, to submit the boxer. It took him a while. They didn't do it in 10 seconds, right? So whenever you hear, oh, Conor, if he wanted to, this will be a 10-second fight. I mean, it could be, but that's not what the record shows us, right? That's not what the record shows us. And this idea that Conor's going to throw a wheel kick and knock Mayweather out, what if he throws a wheel kick and misses and then gets disqualified for attempting it, right? But with that aside, I think I understand why nothing happened, but I will say this, okay? And I listened to a video by Outside the Ropes, and I tend to a certain degree, not 100%, but to a certain degree agree with him, right? That Mayweather he let Conor do some stuff that he wouldn't let another boxer do, right? Let's just put it that way. And to me, it's more of a, well, wait till we get in the boxing ring. But here's the thing, okay? If this is scripted, he's making himself look a little bit like a chump, right? But if something happens, like literally, it's going to last 3-4 seconds, right? At the most. That's as long as it's going to last. Like if he comes up to you and you just throw a punch at him, right? Like, no warning. Like, this is not like one guy's on one side of the octagon, the other guy's on the other side of the octagon, and they say, go, right? They just pop him in the mouth. At that moment, everybody's going to start running towards the both of you, right? So what's really going to happen? Like, the scuffle's going to be broken up really quick, right? And it's going to, So I that's all I had to say about that, right? Now, obviously, if that were to happen, the whole thing would have probably been canceled. So that's why I don't agree 100%, right? But make no mistake about it, man. I really don't know what Floyd has to be concerned about here, because that confrontation is going to last 3-5 seconds at the most, okay? If Toney versus Couture lasted 5 seconds, okay, literally nothing would have happened, right? Maybe Couture takes him down and they take him off with James Toney. I mean, nothing would have happened, right? He didn't beat him in 10 seconds. He definitely didn't beat him in 5 seconds, right? So, but well, that's it. And then in the boxing ring, right? Like, I don't understand what people think McGregor's going to do. What's he going to do? Oh, like I heard Joe Rogan the other day, if Conor starts striking the legs with his kicks. If he strikes a leg in a boxing fight, that's going to be bizarre. That's number one, right? Like, everybody's going to be like, what the fuck is going on? Well, why did he just do that? And if he's lucky, he doesn't get disqualified. Okay, and they took away 2 points from him. That's what would happen. Like he's talking like they're gonna let Conor McGregor just kick away, like like the ref's gonna say, "Hey, Conor, relax with those leg kicks." Like, what? Are you kidding me? And then they're acting like, well, what if McGregor picks him up and takes him down to the ground? Well, what do you think is gonna happen? You think he's gonna start grounding and pounding him? He's gonna have a ref behind him pulling him off, and people jumping in the ring to pull him off. That's what's gonna happen. It's gonna happen so fast. He's not gonna do anything, and he has boxing gloves on. Have you guys ever worn boxing gloves for a workout or something? So that's what I find interesting. And most importantly, right? And most importantly, so a lot of Muay Thai fighters, a lot of former kickboxers, a lot of former, collegiate wrestlers, NCAA wrestlers, right? A lot of, guys with martial arts backgrounds, black belts, okay? A lot of guys with mixed martial arts backgrounds even have gone to the boxing ring and they boxed. And never was there an incident where they started doing other things, okay? It was clearly a boxing fight because that's the zone that they're in, right? That's all I'm going to say about that, okay? Like, I'm not concerned about that as much as other people are, okay? If anything, okay, people think like, oh, this is playing mind games with Floyd, right? So, if anything, the knee-jerk reaction to want to throw a knee or throw a kick, those knee-jerk reactions are going to work against Conor McGregor, right? If anything, because a lot of people are saying, well, what if maybe he doesn't do it intentionally, but he forgets where he's at and get the fuck out of here, okay? When Van Heerden was schooling him in the sparring, he didn't forget where he was. He's going to know exactly where he is, right? Conor McGregor should know exactly where he is. I honestly believe, even if he wasn't losing his whole purse, it would be highly unlikely that he would do something that stupid, okay? Aside from the insecure MMA fans, okay, which you can tap into their insecurities pretty easily, aside from them, nobody would find it funny if Conor McGregor throw a kick, right? It would be up there with Tyson biting Holyfield's ear off, okay? It would be like that bizarreness. It would be there. It's like the guy saying like, oh, it's not a real fight. It's a boxing fight. Like those people clearly understand that the guy's not going to win, and they already have that built-in excuse. That's all that is, right? When you're real, you don't make excuses. Okay, never once did what you hear me after when James Toney got beat. I wasn't one of the people coming out, oh yeah, no, yeah, but let's do it boxing now. Get Couture in the ring. Like I wasn't one of those people doing that. Okay, but James Toney asked for that. James Toney wanted to go to the octagon. That's his problem, right? So anyway, Conor wants to come to the boxing ring, right? So there you go. But anyway, those are just some thoughts. Just want to dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly of boxers going into mixed martial arts. Okay. More ugly than good, but still, all right. Which brings me to this, and this is the final thing I want to talk about before I go. In my opinion, okay, and some are already, but in my opinion, like Floyd, I mean, he came from a time where mixed martial arts wasn't even a thing, so I understand why maybe he never learned and stuff. But a lot of up and coming boxers, in my opinion, okay, should learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, should maybe go to MMA gyms, learn some of their stuff. Like, you know what I mean? And the reason I'm saying that is, because I think a day will come where more and more MMA fighters are going to come to boxing, and vice versa. Actually, I honestly believe that. We may be 20 years from now where you really start seeing it regularly. Okay, but I think that day is coming. I honestly believe that, and I think one of the main reasons, and I think it was to me was evident in the press conferences, right? Was that whenever Conor and Floyd were like face to face, even though they were trash talking and all that, you still got the sense like, like every time Conor would say stuff like, if it was a real fight, I'd smash you, like stuff like that. You just got that sense like, wow, it's true, you know? You just get that sense, like, like it's like that's still, it's in the back of your head, regardless. So it's in the back of Floyd's head, right? Like it's in the back of his head. But if a boxer, let's say, had a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or something like that, or had some type of something else, right? And Conor got in his face, he could be a little more confident in case something goes down, right? Like he could be more confident. Like, yeah, maybe I won't beat you in a professional UFC fight, but I put up a fight. And if we get in a scuffle now, the scuffle's going to last maybe 10 seconds. I'm going to hold my own, motherfucker. I'm not scared of you. So that's why I think boxers should get some of that training in, to not give them that give mixed martial artists that mental edge. Whether you run into them in the street, whether you run into them in a press conference, whatever it is, and just my opinion. Now there's a risk with that. There's a downside to that. What is it? Well, the downside, okay, is that they start having boxing careers and then they transition over to MMA if there's more money over there, right? So that's the downside to it. So, I mean, the sport has to, clean itself up, and, we need a bigger fan base and stuff like that. That's for sure. Okay. Because we are at a time right now where a lot of young kids are learning mixed martial arts, right? And a lot of them have good hands, and a lot of them are going to try boxing, okay, if the money's there. It's going to happen. Like that's going to happen. Like guys that have better hands than Conor McGregor will come to MMA, okay, that we could have used in boxing. So I think the sport of boxing needs to pick a team up, right? And that's a whole other topic, right? A whole other topic for another day. This is why the craft matters. This is why skill matters. This is why great fighters matter more than great fights. And I know people are like, oh, great fights. Great. Of course we want great fights, right? But when we dumb down our own sport, right? When we tell boxers like, no, it's okay if you don't know how to hold. It's okay. They shouldn't hold you. The ref should have done something, right? Well, we're teaching, boxers, to be less skilled. We're teaching boxers to know less about the craft, So if somebody else, in another sport comes in and have great hands, the likeliness of them overtaking the sport of boxing only increases. I believe we're a long ways to go from that, okay? But there's somewhat of a danger there, right? There really, really is. I think the fundamentals in boxing in itself have been diminishing over the years, okay? And that is very problematic and can cause the sport to become, at some point, obsolete, okay? So anyway, It's okay. Well, we still got 10, 20 years, even if that happens. but I think the sport can. I think we've had a good year so far, and a lot of big fights so far that have garnered a lot of interest and attention. And Joshua filling out stadiums over there in the UK, and um, we have a lot of young up and coming boxers that are very talented. So we have a generation or two still of good boxers. Um, the question is, if we look at the future, like what do we have? What do we have? So that is the great question, right? We're seeing diminished boxing gyms in the United States, although there's a spike in interest in other parts of the world. At any point, that can stop. You know, so it's to me the heart and soul of boxing has always been, and I'm not just saying this because I'm American or anything, but I'm saying this because I believe it. The heart and soul of boxing has been, for the most part, you know, the United States / North America. Like that's been the heart and soul because you got to count Mexico and Puerto Rico there. But anyway, that's all I'll say for now. All right, that's all I'll say for now. Thanks to those that were here listening live. I'm going to check one more thing here before I go. I was hoping, man, if we keep, encouraging fighters to fight in a mindless manner, and we diminish the importance of defense, and we diminish the importance of the craft. Boxers can only become less skilled at that point. And I think sometimes that's common sense, but sometimes you need competition, to keep you growing, and that's what boxing is getting for the first time in a very long time with this Conor McGregor situation. I mean, I kind of know what's going to happen. I know it's going to be a pretty easy fight for Floyd, but Floyd comes from a different cloth, and let's say, like, not necessarily this generation now, but let's say 2 generations from now, right? How good are those boxers going to be? And if the best quote unquote boxer of UFC, if they challenge the then boxing pound for pound champion, how will they fare? And I think that is an important question. I would like to think that boxing will always be the superior of fist fighting. I would like to think that, um, but at the same time, we're seeing a gradual decrease in boxing skills. It's gradually happening, and to a certain degree, fans are a little bit responsible for that, right? The networks are a little bit responsible for that. They don't educate the fans on what's going on in the ring. They don't explain to fans what's happening. They just everything is just everything just becomes the constant promotion of rock and sock and robots. The day MMA fighters become better than boxers at fist fighting, like the day that happens, boxing's obsolete. I mean, at that point, there's no need to have boxing. There's no need for it. Like it's no matter how many Arturo Gatti Ward type fights you give them, it's not going to matter. Look, I know that a lot of people. No, as long as you give them exciting fights, people don't care if you win or lose. Like I'm telling you right now, at a subconscious level, people care, right? And I've been trying to bring something up here, and I can't bring it up. There we go. All right. At a subconscious level, people care, right? All right. I'm going to read over some comments really quick before I go. It took me. I don't know what's up with Google, man. It can't take this long to bring up fucking comments, right? All right, he tried boxing later on, and he didn't look too hot. I don't know what we were talking about, bro. Mr. Boxing today. What's up, bro? That Peter kill was gruesome. Yes, it was. And that dude was literally looking up at the sky. Like, that dude was so glassy-eyed. You know, so those are the brutal knockouts. You know, when they're out and their eyes are open. Well, those are the brutal ones. That's when you know a dude's out, right? Like that's when you know that they've gone up to heaven, had tea with God, and came back down. Like, you know, like we got to start asking boxers that get knocked out like that, you know, or anybody gets knocked out like that. Like, what happened? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Like, is there an afterlife? Like, we got to start asking them. Let's see. 9 Proto. I feel like boxers have a better chance in MMA than UFC fighters have in boxing. It depends what level we're talking about. You know, we're talking about, because like I said earlier, boxing has different levels, man. Like there's different levels to boxing. Like there's dudes that are doing boxing as a hobby, okay, and they have like 4 and 30 records. Like, you know what I mean? So it just depends. Like, and then you have your journeyman boxers, and then you have your you know, your gatekeepers, and you got your contenders, and you know, you got your top 50 guys, and your top 20 guys, and your top 10 guys. You know what I mean? Top 5 guys. We're talking about different levels of boxing here. But so it depends, you know. And I also think that it depends on the individual, right? Like, it depends. Like, if it's Paulie Malignaggi, right? No disrespect to Paulie, but I mean, Paulie doesn't knock anybody out. So even if Paulie lands a shot, you know, before somebody takes him down, you know, I don't have a lot of faith that Paulie will knock him out. Like, you know, and no offense to the guy, but you know, if you get a power puncher in boxing, you know, he has a puncher's chance. At the very least, he has a puncher's chance. You know, but you could say the truth. I mean, a guy with a big punch has a puncher's chance in either sport. I guess you can say that, but it just depends. I think it depends on the boxer. It depends on the circumstance, or the fighter. That is, it depends on the circumstance. I think it's an individual thing. That's my personal opinion, right? That's just my personal belief. Mr. Boxing today, I remember that Lewis Barnes session. Well, there you go. There you go. 9 Proto. I feel like boxers have better chance in him. I already read that. I'm sorry. Somebody just remembers James Toney off the top. Well, I mentioned the other guys, so McGregor gonna get a wax. I agree. Would this be the biggest upset in the last 30 years when McGregor wins? Somebody said yes. Okay. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up with that, guys, and with that question by Mr. Boxing today. If McGregor wins, if Conor McGregor wins that fight, that would be. This word is overused, but that would be shocking, right? I don't recall the last time. Like, there's a difference between surprised, you know, like when, and I know I use the word shock a lot, and we all do, but when Pacquiao was in a close fight with Horn, I was surprised. It surprised me, but I was in shock. I was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? I'm not gonna lie. When Ray Mercer knocked out Tim Silva, I was between surprised and shocked, because I thought, I mean, this is MMA. It's Tim Silva's backyard. There's no reason he should lose to Ray Mercer, and then Ray Mercer knocked his ass out, right? Which was absolutely insane, and which I'm surprised was not covered by the media. Okay, like ESPN wasn't really talking about it. I don't believe anyway. which is crazy. You know, they talked about James Toney losing nonstop. You know, but when Ray Mercer pulled it off, nobody talked about that, right? But you know, fair. I mean, at the same time, one was UFC, the other one was a underground MMA promotion. But so to be fair, you know, but that's the thing. But I would be legitimately shocked if McGregor wins. Like, in shock. I would be like, holy fuck. What the fuck did I just see? Right? Where would I rank it in all-time upsets? Everybody's saying it would be the biggest upset in sports history. Probably. Probably. Right? I would probably say so. All right? Anyway, that's all I got. That's all I got for tonight. This is DStyleBoxing. I'm out.